All right.
So for those on the lower side, I mean, that's a 1 and a 3. But Javid, it seems like you just haven't had time to work on it, right? Is that the issue? Okay. Yeah. And I imagine Tally, it's similar for you too. I would love to focus on like what the big constraints are for the people that are not performing to what they wanted to be.
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit.
Right.
Life happens, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, like last week, I felt like I had a really strong starting week. And then the very next week, it was like we had like family emergencies, we had planned surgeries, we had all sorts of stuff happening. A friend had to leave the country. Um, yeah, so like just a lot of things happening in the periphery, right? And some of it's planned, some of it's not. And like you kind of got to like roll with it. And I
Yeah.
think for me, I rate myself at a 3 because it's not going to plan, but that doesn't mean like you have to let it go and give up on this if this is something you care about. For me, like I care about this, so I still want to participate, as much as I can, but that just has to change the way that that looks for me.
Absolutely. That's absolutely it. Yeah, so I think adapting to reality is going to be really key in the next few weeks, especially. And it's just going to be more important as we get closer and closer to the deadline. So have you found that, and this is to everybody, let's say this, how close to your original vision are you committed to hitting? Or have you had to make some pretty serious compromises in order to achieve the goal? And we can put this on because there's more people joining the room. So just for everybody, I'll repeat that question and I'll add a little metric to it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how close to your original vision are you executing? 10 being like it's exactly what I wanted it to be, 1 being like it's nowhere near that. In relationship to how much pressure there has been on you in the outside world and in real life.
Hello, hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Oh, hello, everybody.
Hey, hey.
Uh, well, I'm not really trying to think too much about matching the original idea, more than just trying to get as much as I can from what I have from my first sketches,
Okay.
and just committing to as much as I can every day. That's kind of like what I'm trying to do at work
Just work
and
on
at
it every
home.
day.
Yeah, just a little bit. Sometimes it's like 20 minutes, sometimes it's like an hour, sometimes it's 3 hours. And that's kind of like for me the only thing that I try to follow, to try to make that
Okay.
pretty, how to say, sacred.
And did you make a production schedule? And to everybody, did you guys make a production schedule that first week? Yeah. All right.
Personally, like a schedule, like write it down, not necessarily, but I just try to commit to that time frame, and that's how
Sure.
I can see things moving forward. And when I need to actually put something, the thing also for me, it's the first time doing RenderMan, so I know there's things that I don't know how they work.
Yeah.
So I need, for me, it's important to have that kind of space to play around. That is not always trying to match a deadline. If not, it kind of
Sure.
kills the fun of the
Sure.
process. Yeah.
There's certainly an advantage to this being like a personal challenge in that you don't have to adhere to clients' requirements. You can be a lot more flexible. Um, okay, so for those that did a schedule, uh, Naomi, Kat, Shania, um, is it time to revisit that schedule? Does it need to be adapted to the current timeline? Because I think after 4, 5, 6 weeks into a 12-week thing, it's very likely that we're slowly going to have strayed as rubber hit the road and as reality has taken its course. And so I'm wondering if this is something that you're sticking very closely to, or if this is something that needs to be adjusted. Okay, I'm gonna just call on people so we get some a little bit more interaction. Naomi, are you available to like unmute your mic and tell us how the schedule's going? Yeah. Shania says life is happening. Yeah. Definitely adjusted mine. I switched to a simpler idea for time. Okay. Okay. No microphone today. That's all good. No worries.
Okay, I'll jump in.
Sure.
So I got some really, really good feedback from especially from Cash, like from the
Yeah.
very beginning, right? And I wouldn't say I'm straying far from my idea. I'm building on it as I go. Uh, the thing is, Leaf brought it up in one of the comments. He said that I can't get too caught up into the pre-production. It's good that I've been trying to plan it out and see the concept and everything, so that when I jump into 3D, it's faster and I know what I'm doing. I'm not experimenting.
Yeah.
And then I'm starting to change, like, what if I need to tweak this? What if I need to change this? And then it kind of drags. And then I'm hit with the reality, yeah, I need to actually start getting something blocked in 3D. Even if I wanted to change some things in the concept, at least I have a foundation and I can tweak it as I go. So that put things in perspective. Like I would say that's the only going off schedule part. I didn't expect to spend so much time on pre-production, if that makes sense. But it's
Yeah.
just because I really have a vision for it and I keep building on it. And I'm like, I want it to be matching as close as possible to my idea when I execute it. But then now I have to do some, like there are priorities, right? And I need to get something done. And there's nothing wrong about doing the concept simultaneously as I have a foundation, 3D foundation. I can still tweak things in the concept and change things a bit. So that's the approach I'm gonna take moving on.
Yeah. So you've still stayed in pre-production until this moment?
I did experiment with 3D and I didn't like any of the layouts. Like initially, that's how I started. I started blocking right away. And
Yeah.
then I'm more of a visual guy. Like I love concept art and DMP, just like I need to see it before I can bring it to 3D. So after a lot of attempts in 3D and experimentations, I was like, I can keep experimenting forever and I'm never happy with an angle or a look. So I was like, let's just go back to the basics. I'm just gonna paint it out and visualize it in 2D, then build upon that in 3D. So it took a bit of time because of that, basically. I thought I would just jump in 3D and,
Yeah, just take it.
just
Yeah.
take it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's great feedback from Leif because everyone's production pipeline, this is true for massive studios, this is true for individual projects or projects. Like everyone's pipeline is going to have an optimum level of work done in each department before it becomes overworking and needs to move on, right? And underworking in pre-production is brutal on time. Like there's a lot of productions that go all the way through animation and then the director says, you know what, I've decided that's not what this shot is going to be like. And then they have to take it all the way back to the beginning, which is a huge investment of time and effort and resources that often just gets cut and left on the cutting room floor. At the same time, yeah, you have to push the ball forward. So a good production technique or a good production pipeline analysis that I was taught like very, very early when I was working at a studio was every time you move a problem over into the next department to solve, you 10x the effort and resources required to solve it. Right? So if it's like, oh, you know what? We don't need a perfect rig, we'll just do it in animation. Okay, cool. It's 10 times harder, right? It's like, oh, that animation isn't perfect, we'll just try to fix it in lighting. All right, cool. That's 10 times harder, right? So it's definitely worth making sure that you have as solid a take as possible before you move that capture into the next department. but there does get to be a point where you continue working on it and quality doesn't change. It's different, but it's not necessarily better. Sometimes it's worse. Like overcooking is such a real thing.
And if I could add an example to that, it just came to mind. We were talking the other day about a famous U.S. architect, Frank Lloyd Wright. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's very influential in architecture here in the United States and across the globe, I guess, many countries. One of his, or probably the most famous home he ever built, Falling Water, was built the opposite. He was a very big planner. Massive amounts of drafting before getting to a client, all kinds of stuff. If you see that particular house, the client called him and was like, I'll be there in a week. And he hadn't done anything for like months, He was like caught up with something else. So then he didn't skip the planning stage. He didn't skip the drafting phase. But that urgency allowed him to come up with the very first thought that came to mind and commit to that. And guess what? Just like in test taking, your first thought is probably right. So you get to a point where you doubt yourself so much and you try to polish so much that the concept eventually, after 3 months of tweaking, doesn't really sound like you anymore. It doesn't sound like the most effervescent, right, version of you, like the most serendipitous version of you. It looks a little bit contrived and less creative than maybe you would have done in the beginning. So planning is good, but it's got to have a limit, like Conor was saying. It's got to be to a point where you can commit to something, even if it's a portion of it, and let that drive the rest of the choices.
Absolutely. Hey, Aubrey, you've had your hand up for a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. This is my first time coming to this meeting, so I'm very
Welcome.
excited to be here. This is also my first time participating in this contest. And so you're asking how there's a schedule, and I didn't set up a rigid schedule for myself, but rather I kind of had an idea in my mind of what I want to do in what order.
Mhm.
And what I found is something I didn't even know about. Like, I had not used RenderMan before, and
Mhm.
I thought I could just put it on at the very end and render anything, but it sounds like it's not that simple. So I have to
I don't think so.
add into my schedule um, learning how to set up all the materials in RenderMan. And so that's one thing is having to learn at the same time as I'm producing.
Yep.
Another thing is something I get caught up in is the details. Like trying to do too many details when it's not the right time to do the details.
Yep.
So that's something I have to catch myself doing and move on so I don't get too caught up.
This is
Yep.
for the art challenge.
Those are really good questions. I mean,
Yeah.
one is like learning Blender is a whole new thing, right? You have to account for time for that. And you have to stop yourself from getting too far ahead. And I think we spoke about this in another meeting, right, Connor? Like you have to, if the challenge is something that you can also abstract into a concept, like you can challenge yourself and
Or she uses Adobe, como Photoshop or Illustrator.
Alvarez, could we please mute you? Yeah.
I
Thanks.
was able to mute others. So when you commit to learning Blender, and if it's becoming too much, because it is, right, to start 3D from scratch, try to make the challenge a very contrived version of what this grand vision that you have. Maybe the challenge is doing one alien, and then using some of the background assets that we give you as a base, and then not touching those, taking advantage of the textures, maybe reshading it a little bit, going as simple as you can get. And then, use some like beginner stuff, like some beginner tricks are using heavy defocus, right? So You put all your stuff in the back that's a little bit easier, right? Or a little bit kind of built out. And you defocus that, you kind of build a background base. And then you focus on one or two particular assets. So now you can still build a story, something interesting, but you've taken the scope way down to something that's more manageable, you know? And you can really give yourself that goal with a lot more limitations, and you'd be surprised how amazing an image would be with significantly less scope. And then always account in your schedule. I think we've spoken about this in other meetings. Always account in your schedule for learning. So if you're if you're scheduling for half an hour a day, I would schedule 15, 20 more minutes that day. Learn the concept that you are going to be applying, learn that first, and then go into production that day, and then try to take it and into effect. So always account for 30 to 40% more for your learning. If you don't do that, it'll feel like you're kind of swimming against the current a little bit, and it gets a little frustrating. So hopefully that encapsulated some of the thoughts.
Thank you. One clarification. I have used Blender before, but not RenderMan. But still, your advice is still very helpful.
Are
So
you
thank
using
you.
RenderMan in Blender or using it in my
In Blender, yeah.
Yeah. So that's also new territory as well. That was something that
Yeah.
I was talking to Eugene at the RenderMan Art and Science Fair about integrating RenderMan into Blender and how well that's going, but it is still, it's not as let's say as established as it is in Maya, right? So there's still going to be some hiccups along the way, I'm sure.
You're gonna have to wait for 2027 for Blender and RenderMan to be great.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean it's always the way of software, eh?
Yeah, it's really good in 2027. We've done a lot of work on it, so yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, the version that you were demoing at the Art and Science Fair was really legit. I mean, I had a friend of mine using it, a client actually using it like 2 years ago, and it was very, very different already. So, yeah, it's definitely maturing. It's lovely to see. But I want to touch on what you're bringing up, Aubrey. It's like going too deep into the details. Not really, you didn't really have that production schedule, like you said. And this is stuff that we've talked about, like setting aside time for training, setting aside time for R&D, being able to learn the software. I would say one of my biggest pieces of advice for doing the most efficient R&D possible, which is research and development, which if it's your first time using RenderMan, like it's going to be key, is don't try to apply your first lesson in your scene. Like learning, like Leif said, learning the concept, watching some YouTube tutorials, doing, a demo of it or something like that. That's great. But then after that, doing your own little version of that, still in a clean scene. Not jumping from like this tutorial straight into the challenge, because the challenge is going to have a lot of creative differences that are going to challenge that tool, and they're going to challenge that concept. And that's great, but you don't want to be challenging it while you're learning it. So if you're studying a car paint material, great, download some demo scene, match it, cool. But then make a car paint sphere on your own, right? With your own colors and your own thing. And then once you feel really familiar with it and you've done it in a platonic empty scene with just 3-point lighting and you totally get it. Love that, Eugene. Love that. That's great. Learn, practice, learn, practice, learn, practice. Yeah, exactly. It's the practice that will make the application repeat. Beautiful. Beautiful. That looks like a handy little book. What is that book?
I made it. It's all a letter set.
Love that, dude. Oh, that's so great.
That's a really common thing in production that you pointed out, Connor, that we execute concepts in the most basics of scenes. That's super important. Yeah. I mean, not only is that useful for distilling the concept into like its most individual state, but it really takes out any other any other issue with the scene that might be becoming a problem with compatibility, or maybe it's just slowing down the scene because you have to translate everything before you get to the thing. And I think you alluded to this already, Connor, about putting it in other words, but simpler the better, and then you can kind of extrapolate that and then grow from there. So
Yeah, learning a new tool. It's yeah. If you were learning hair and fur and groom, you wouldn't want to be doing that on the alien. Like do it on a sphere, really figure it out on a sphere, you know, or a cube and then a cone and then a torus and then pink and then blue and then you're okay with polka dots. Okay, got it. I've got the tool now. Now I can creatively apply all of that practice. And I know that this is a timeline. We're on a timeline, right? So it's like, well, yeah, but I don't have time to do all that experimentation. Except for that it will take you way longer if you don't. Right? Because like Leif said, there's other things in the scene that are going to overcomplicate it, that are going to make it difficult. If you're trying to do texturing in a lit scene and not in a neutral scene, it's going to really constrain the colors that you're able to see, because your light's going to be different. It might be in a dark scene. It might be with amber street lights or something like that. And you're just not going to be able to texture in that environment, right? That's why we build neutral, simple scenes to develop each department and then apply in the context and then tweak for magic. That's actually the fastest way.
and each 3D tool has its frustration and its magic and its good stuff. Whenever I switch, I'm like, oh right, this takes me 5 or 10 clicks instead of 2 or 3 in this other tool. But those 10 clicks are more purposeful and they're better. So every tool's got its quirk, and sometimes as I walk down the Pixar halls, I get reminded, because we have our old archives there of how we used to make films. And I'm reminded how privileged we are to kind of have these tools that we still consider, that they're not at their best. I mean, part of my job is to improve these tools with the engineers, to kind of give them feedback, and so is Eugene, so that every version we're looking at a better version of what we came up with before, right? But as I walk down those halls, I'm reminded that there's a statue there with a wireframe drawn on, that somebody had to manually scan into a computer for weeks on end to paint each vertice. So something that used to take weeks is now distilled down to a very simple 5-minute process. So in that way, it's important for us to understand that these tools still give us tremendous amount of creative latitude if we understand what we have to do and make some hard choices, which I'd love to talk about these hard choices as well, right?
Yeah.
Trying to see what works best for us. I don't understand fluids very well. You know what? I'm just going to do a couple of presets, or I'm going to go download an Embergen example instead of trying to drown myself in a whole field of study that maybe I'm not that proficient with. Really understand your limits and advance what you have time to advance. And what you don't have time to advance, focus on something else, or maybe refine an area that you already love and are very happy with. Going all the way back to Tali, is like, sometimes life happens and you have to redefine what is going to be a successful challenge for you, and making those really hard compromises is important.
I think just to add to that, it's you don't, part of the challenge is not to you don't actually have to finish the whole picture. You know what I mean? Like the part of the point of the challenge is to learn some things so that you become better. You don't have to, make the world's greatest rendering and, to be a winner. If you just pick one small thing and learn that over 3 months and become better at it, then that in itself is, that is a challenge that you've set yourself, and, you've kind of won it yourself. So I think that's an important thing to, don't stress out. I've got to have a full picture and render it and submit it. It's like, just show us what you learn. I think that's important.
No doubt.
For me, that's actually something that makes me just move forward every day. If I think about a prize or sort of like competition, I would not be able to see all the things that I'm able to, to learn from the whole. And so for me, that's the main purpose. So that keeps me ongoing to see how much I can ideally finish and submit. But I don't see that as the only goal. If not, I would get stressed. And
Yeah.
I already had
I
that
mean,
from work. So I said to
yeah,
probably do
no,
it.
no, for sure. And you
Yeah.
learn from this year, and next year you come back bigger and stronger and with more knowledge, and take on another part of a pipeline and learn some more. I mean, learn all the time, not just in these 3 months, like every day or whenever you can.
Yeah, I was gonna say one of the biggest takeaways from last meeting for me personally was first of all, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. Is it life or leaf?
It's a good question. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't mind. I've stopped
How do you want
asking
me to
people to
pronounce it?
pronounce it correctly. Is it Dita or Dida? I don't know.
Dita.
Right?
Yeah, I know, because that would piss me off if someone said Dida. So I want to
No,
ask
in
you.
my case, it's pronounced Leif, like
Leif.
Layph. So
Leif. Okay.
Leif, yeah.
Leif. All right,
Yeah,
got
but
it.
it doesn't. You can say Leif. It's fine.
No, it's Leif. So I just wanted to thank you for my biggest takeaway from last week was understand your, like when you said, how do you think Toy Story was done back in 1995? I was like everybody has a technological limit. I have a limit. And the power is to really understand and accept that limit and do the best with what you got. Because I'm always, when I'm setting myself up to, like Eugene was saying, I want to do the best render or I want to do the best job or the best concept or whatever it is, then it's just overwhelming. You're almost setting yourself up to failure instead of actually accomplishing anything. And I changed my mindset completely. I was like, okay, here's my limitations. Here's what I know, how to utilize these tools to do the best within the time limitation that I have right now. And that helped me a lot with the crowds. Like we were talking, you were mentioning, like how can I do a crowd, but I don't want to do a crowd sim, something I've never touched upon before. And then I learned a simple way to rig and pose, and I'm just gonna do that, apply that for a few characters, and maybe just USD scatter them, right? Like whatever works. It doesn't have to be perfect. Same with
That's right.
Groom. Same with
That's
Groom.
right.
I'm not gonna go crazy with strands and just enough to get what I need from the picture. And we always think as artists that when you show your work, people expect the breakdown. And it's as if like the most complicated techniques that you use makes you shine better. That's how we like that's something deep inside. Like when I'm watching on LinkedIn someone doing a breakdown, I'm like, holy, this is crazy. How did he do all this? And he's showing all the complexities. That's almost how people, or maybe even recruiters, that's what we think. It's as if you're flexing. I know all these tools, but then if, like to me at least, it's the end result that matters. I don't care how complex you use these tools. It's a tool. Like, what's the actual outcome? And
Right,
that's something I struggled with too.
but if I had to reframe that if I had to reframe that and separate it into two pillars, one is a personal pillar, right? And one is, you're right, is flexing or showcasing the tools that we know, but very much like an Instagram model. You don't know that there's a makeup artist, a photographer, a lighting person, somebody that tweaked the background, post, all these things, right? Is that the one photo makes you feel very insecure about who you are because you don't understand the process that's happening and what's being showcased truly. And an artist is the very same way in that, yes, that process and that might be incredibly amazing, but it might have taken them 5 months, right? And that is in production. So in the art challenge, we're trying to mimic production. Production has an end, right? Like it has an end, it has a schedule, and it has compromises, which is what this meeting is truly about, is trying to make compromises to meet an end goal. Yes, and we've said it here, if those are too lofty and you don't think that you have enough time to complete this, definitely take it as a learning potential, attend the meeting and do this. If you truly want to end with an image, you need to make compromises around what you can learn, how you want to learn it, and that is an important thing. When you go to an employer and the employer is like, this is an amazing image. This is truly more than probably I've ever done here as a VFX soup in this place. How did you do it? Well, it took me 9 months. Well, I can't hire you to do one shot for 9 months, right? So the post houses deal with tremendous amount of complexity and ramping up of people working on certain shots. It's a massive pipeline. We can't do that as an art challenge as a single artist. So you need to be able to focus, mimic what that might be, but have an end goal. And they're going to give you like something like that at a job. They're going to tell you this shot needs to be done by Friday, and you're going to have to deal with that, right? And you might be in a more kind of atomic role. You might be a lighter or a shading artist or something. So you might have to kind of pull your weight. But ILM and many other companies have a generalist department, which very much mimics the art challenge in that you are given assets and you have to build this from scratch in any tool you like. And they might use 3D Studio Max and V-Ray instead of the traditional pipeline of RenderMan and something else. And it's that particular shot that they're getting out the door in 3 weeks to 4 weeks, and that artist has full leverage to work with their director on that particular vision. That has an end. That person has to be incredibly good at this particular topic, at planning out, making compromises. You're right, making garbage in the back, pulling up an old library of animations for crowd in the back, and then maybe doing a couple of hero things up front. So tricking the viewer, right? There's a million ways you can go about this, but finishing well and taking pride of that and scheduling is of utmost importance. So, don't be too fooled about what you see out there. Really focus on how that overlaps with truly a production schedule, and truly where you should be motivating yourself is in finishing work. So, um, it's tough. It's tough to be out there. You feel very demoralized. You see these amazing work, but I wanted to separate those two things into those two concepts so that we get that. Yeah.
There
If
was
I can,
I
go
just
ahead,
wanted to
Tony.
add to what Leif, sorry, I just want to add to what Leif was saying, is that one of the things that I kind of do, maybe not as often as I wanted to, is I set myself a limit of 90 minutes. So I bought an egg timer, I put it on my desk, I figure out what I'm going to do. I'm going to do like a fake metal letterpress rendering, and I figure it out. Like I know what I'm going to do before I start the timer, and then I'll set it for 90 minutes and I'll work for that time and get it as far as I can, do it, and trying to figure out like one thing that I'm going to learn in that time. And I'll press render and I'll put it on my gram, whatever you kids call it, and it's done. Like I'm not trying to change the world with a 90-minute piece of work. It is what it is. And then I'll do another one. I think, I want to do some grass over or whatever, and I'll take a certain period of time, and as soon as that timer stops, I press render. If it looks rubbish, it looks rubbish. If it doesn't, then you're lucky. But and I put it out there for the world. I'm not trying to, there's something refreshing about doing that. It's like, see how good you can make something in a short amount of time, because you can learn a lot when you're actually in a focused learning crunch.
And that also simulates production in that you have a deadline, and when it's finished, it's finished. You don't get to go back and edit the movie after it's in theaters. Like it's done, it's released, right? So I think if I were to synthesize like Eugene's and Leif's spectrum of opinions there, we have Eugene's original advice, which is like lower the stakes. Like you don't have to make the most beautiful museum-worthy art piece of all time that wins this challenge and is the most amazing life-changing art, right? Just focus on what you want to learn, and if you advance your skills, then you won the challenge, right? That is kind of the point. And on the other side of that continuum is, but this does mimic production, right? And if your intention is to advance your professionalism as an artist, to be an art professional, then you want to take this as seriously as you can and meet those deadlines and have that plan. And don't over plan, like we were saying. Don't let pre-production eat your whole schedule, right? Push things forward and push it to the finish line, so that way you have produced the best possible thing you can given the time constraints, right? So I think both, like, all truth is paradox. Both are equally true, right? And it depends on what you're trying to get out of this. If it is very hobby oriented and you're just enjoying the process and you're enjoying how it's making you change how you think, how you see the world, it's advancing what you know, then like, awesome, keep at it, keep chipping away, no worries, right? On the other side of things, if you know that well, it's just it's categorical. Like, for example, I've been working on painting my surfboard. There's no deadline on that. You know, it took me a week to take off the wax. It doesn't take a week, you know? And then then next weekend I bought acetone to give it a wash. Like, it doesn't take a week to buy acetone. I'm chipping away at that thing. There's no deadline. I'm just having fun. It's just for the process. I'm also not starting a surfboard painting business. I'm also not trying to be hired as a surfboard painter, right? If I wanted to be a surfboard painter for money, then that stuff's got to be done in 2 days tops, you know, like, and then the next time I do it, it's got to be in one. I have to be more efficient, be more optimal, and continue to improve professionally, not just in my timeliness, but also just in the quality of the asset produced, in this case, the surfboard. In the 3D world, it's different. If I'm looking for clients, or if I'm looking for studios to hire me, or if I want to work on movies, I got to treat my personal projects as if they are production pipelines, that I'm going to master my own production pipeline. That way I go into the interview and they say, how do you make this? I say, well, this is my production technique. This is how I did it. This is how long it took me. And they go, hey, you know, that's pretty close to ours. I think you'd be a pretty easy fit. We're going to have to train you on some stuff. But yeah, that's kind of how we do things as well. And it's going to be easier for you to fit into that professional environment. So yeah, there is, and it's not like two distinct categories, it's a continuum, right? Like, of course, we're all making art because we love it so much. And I'm sure everyone in this room, if you were not a paid professional artist, you'd still be picking up a pencil or a paintbrush or clicking around in RenderMan, you'd still be doing something. Right? So there is that hobbyist passion side of it, which I think if you're thinking about both, lowering the stakes, so that way it's not so much pressure on you, but also still producing in a production environment, then you can really get magic out of employing both of those mindsets together. Right? I think we can talk about, I think everyone in here has had to compromise on the vision. They've had to make choices. They've had to cut stuff out. It's changing because life happened. And I think it's a good time to talk about how to do that. And I think if we go back to our log lines, the very beginning, that true North Star of what do you want this piece to be emotionally? What story are you trying to tell? What is the interesting thing? When you reduce stuff and you cut things out, it can make it more concise, more simple, and stronger. Or you can cut things out and you miss the story. You're cutting out essential pieces. So I think of it like a soup. I made a big soup last night. I don't know if you guys can hear. I've got like a head cold, right? So I made a huge soup last night. And like the best part of making the soup the tastiest is when you just let it simmer and it reduces and reduces and reduces and reduces. And what's left is the tastiest, most concentrated flavor possible. So if we can take our project like that, and instead of thinking about it as a compromise, as a sacrifice, as cutting things out, I want you to boil away the things that aren't necessary. Right? And really, how do we decide that? Return to that log line. What are you trying to get out of this challenge in the first place? What are you trying to convey? What was the whole point of this? We got 47 and a half days left. That's a lot of good boiling time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good thought. And if I had to keep the restaurant analogy going, a lot of restaurants, instead of doing a good job like that, and that what separates a Michelin star restaurant from not, right? Is maybe instead of doing that, they'll just thicken it with some flour or something, you know? So there are ways to thicken the stew and fake that beautiful process of letting it truly simmer and become the best soup it can, right? We don't want to do that. You want to take you want to take advantage of this 90 days. We're not doing a week challenge. It's a 90-day challenge. You can make Conor's great soup. You can do the best work, and that takes compromise. That takes planning. One of the things that I like to do a lot is just kind of sacrifice my own time for a thing. If I've got kids, right, and I like video games. I can't play video games anymore. So I need to sacrifice something, and usually it's my sleep. So I'll be playing at 10 p.m. until 1 a.m. and then I'll play in a couple hours of video games, and I'll be going through the Japanese role playing about some teenager saving the world, and I'm super happy, and that's that. And tomorrow I'll wake up a little bit more tired, but happy about doing that. Same thing with personal work. If I'm going through that, I'll be like, I used to, I'll sacrifice this weekend and I won't go out. I won't go see a friend. I won't go do that. And I'll do that for this amount of time. That also mirrors my university time. Like during university, I didn't get to play games for 5 years. And that's just what that was, and um, I would just work and then study. And I sacrificed years of my life in order to grow as an artist, as a technician, and do these things. You can still do that. You can see, when can you sacrifice? What sacrifices can you make? Wake up maybe one day, a couple of hours earlier, you're refreshed and you're doing these things. They're like being and ending a project has a gratification, has a feeling in itself. And we sometimes often confuse being happy with same thing as being successful at something. But being successful, that's like an end goal to something, and it can be a little bit of a hardship, a little bit of a sacrifice along the way to get there. And the end result will be a complete new feeling, a mixture of happiness and success and personal journey that's kind of worth going through. But that takes a lot of planning. We sometimes get caught off in the mindfulness of the artwork, like Conor was saying, right? Like I want to do my board as mindfulness because it makes me happy, but sometimes there are other feelings that make us feel very compelled to reach them, even though it's just not happiness. And I think art falls into that category. That's why the most powerful stories tell sad stories and stories of our past or a trauma or love, or these things are difficult. And our personal work embodies some of that as well. It sprinkles in there. So kind of take advantage of that journey, see what things you can sacrifice to reach these goals, and use the end goal as a prize in itself to reach it. And I think you'll see that it pays off.
I also this might be stepping a little bit into the woo-woo territory, but if we use the language of the Greeks talked about the muse, right? The muse would select a vessel, and that vessel would be an artist that gets to accept the muse or reject the muse. And the muse is trying to speak through the vessel, right? A lot of artists talk about this, a lot of musicians, a lot of painters talking about acting as a vessel for some higher, more spiritual energy, whatever you want to call it, the muse or inspiration or the universe or God or whatever it may be. There's some creative force that is trying to speak through the vessel. Not everyone holds this belief. Totally cool if you don't. I find it very useful to think of myself as a vessel for the muse instead of thinking of myself as the entire sole creator of the project I'm working on. That is a heavy burden to bear. And it can be very difficult because I wrap up my own identity into the thing that I'm making. Well, am I the type of person that makes this type of render? And that's just a lot of baggage. But if I think of, well, what is the muse trying to say to me today? Right? What is the muse trying to express through me? Then those challenges that come up, the life stuff, it's like, oh, friend getting kicked out of the country. Ooh, uh-oh, surgery. It's like, hey, what is the muse trying to teach me right now? Thus, I may be able to apply it in my art. You know, it's not often that you commit yourself to a personal project of this scope. And in that process, the muse is saying, hey, I'm going to give you some pretty difficult emotions to deal with. And I'm going to give you some pretty difficult timelines to try to collaborate with. And in that process, if you have all these inputs, inspiration from everywhere. I don't know if you guys are like this, but like I can't walk down the street without noticing all the shaders. You know what I mean? Like you see, I see the asphalt, I'm like, that is an amazing procedural generated asphalt, right? Subsurface scattering on leaves. You know, it doesn't even need to be the cliche God rays. Like it can just be a rusty bolt on the dirt. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So when inspiration comes from so many different avenues, for me, it can be difficult because I want to paint the screw and I want to paint the leaf and I want to render the asphalt and I want to procedurally generate the ocean. And it's like, oh, so many inputs. And then also my friend has to leave the country and my family member has surgery and all this other stuff is going on. And maybe I'm stressed because I have bills to pay or jobs are rejecting me and stress, anxiety, all these different inputs. And then a very few limited, selected, and designed outputs. Well, I'm going to express that in this camera angle and in this texture and in this shot for this RenderMan challenge, right? Like a RenderMan challenge is long enough and big enough for you to actually put yourself into it. Right? So when that stuff comes, you don't have to think about it, oh, this is knocking me off path or knocking me off my plan. It can be, oh, I've been given something to integrate into my work. And that way it becomes a part of your productivity is to go make sure that you see your friend off or make sure that you're calling the person that had the surgery and that they're doing well and that you're there for them and you're able to fill your cup with that life experience. That way you have something to pour into your RenderMan Art challenge. Right? So
I mean, like, I
yeah,
love
go
that you use the term work, right? Like, even though it's personal, right? It is not your friend's birthday party that you can miss. It's not, it is a thing that you need to schedule, right? Like something that you need to treat as a goal. Even though it's personal, it doesn't mean it's lesser than other things that you're passionate about. It doesn't mean it's lesser than work or lesser than other obligations. If you've committed yourself to doing something, anything, and it's important enough to grow as an artist, it's just as important as something else. So, like from a practical perspective, what I do personally is I put it on my calendar because I am of the personality, like many creatives, like Connor pointed out, that I will let the wonders of the world take me away from the responsibilities of the world. I will be looking out of this window next to me and be like, look at that bird over there, da da da. Like my mind does wonder, like with the beauty of it all, right? Like I would do this, I would do that with that leaf or that shader. Calendarize. If you put it on Google Calendar, like if it's there and you have a notification, the world will stop you and be like, I know this sucks, but you got to get to this, And now you have a concerted effort to distance yourself from what makes you passionate. You are most likely to engage with it because it's something you've told yourself, I wanted to accomplish this. And it's there, and now you're engaging with it. And that's the important thing. So, like manifesting it into something physical, into that calendar, into something else, super important for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's the both sides of things. It's being present in the moment and allowing inspiration and nature and life to allowing it and accepting it and being a patient observer of what's going on externally and what's going on internally, and then calendarizing that into work. I think when we think about work-life balance in a professional context, and I think it's on a continuum again. It's like if you're an accountant or if you're doing something, well, I mean, a lot of accountants love doing accounting for sure, but it's like if you're doing something for money, like you work at a bank or whatever, and it's not really what you want to do, but you're getting paid really well, work-life balance is super important. You need to be able to put work in its category and you need to be able to put life into its category, right? And that's true in a studio context as well, right? Because you're making someone else's vision, right? But when you're making your vision, it's not about balancing work and life as if they're two opposing forces that are naturally going to fight each other. And if you give too much to one, the other one fails. And if you, no, it's more about work-life integration, right? How am I going to express my life in my work? And how is my work going to change my life, right? Two wheels on a bike. It's something that are two opposing forces on the end of a lever. It's something that is like one unified creative life.
See, I'm not sure you can even give it the work name. I don't even think work is the right word for it. You know, like you're making art. It doesn't feel like work to me. Like work-life balance should be art-life balance, I think. It's you're like you're making art. You're not working down a coal mine or whatever. This is you're blessed to be able to do it, and you know, it's a it's a skill to be able to have a artistic and creative mind that can think of weird and wonderful things and have the skills to be able to try and put all those things together. So yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah, again, it's on one end of the spectrum, because I think about the work of lining up the tape on my surfboard, or the work of making sure that this render computes in the right time, and tweaking the samples and making sure that the fall off in the light, like all those things are work decisions, but we do have to like contextualize this with the overwhelming gratitude that what a pleasure it is to even get to consider that work.
Yeah, it
You
also
know,
depends.
that's a recent phenomenon, really.
It also depends where you are in your life. Like when I was much younger, I didn't have as many responsibilities. I could totally treat myself as you're just an artist. Any space you have to breathe, you will be making art, and you need to contextualize your entire life around this. And anything else is kind of a waste of time. Suddenly you have a job, or we're lucky enough with Eugene where we get to do what we love and work at the same thing. Many of you might have the same luck, or you might be working towards that same fortunate thing of living a creative life. If you're working something else and you have to lead a creative life in an individual position, you need to slot that and allocate time for that, so that you can look forward to a show, because in your calendar there's nothing there at 9 p.m. If you don't calendarize it, then your free time becomes it becomes cannibalizing. You start to become very anxious and guilt tripping yourself. I shouldn't be watching this show. I shouldn't be hanging out with my friends. I shouldn't be doing the things I love because I didn't accomplish this. Don't do that. Calendarize it. If you have an hour a day to give to this, give that hour, and then enjoy all the other things that need your serendipitous, unplanned time to be happy. If you conflate those two things, you're going to have a very chaotic life where you can't differentiate between the things that other people want from you and you want for yourself, and you're going to start to combine those in a toxic way. Put time to this, and then leave time open for things that don't need time to calendarize.
I think it's important to add that the time you put on it needs to be quiet time as well. Like I would wake up at 3 and work until 7. Works, damn it, it's not work, is it? I forgot the word I mentioned. But I would class that as just free time. I didn't have to do my Pixar job. I didn't have to do something else. I could just make whatever I wanted. It's like free time that, between 3 and 7 in the morning, I would get up and just do whatever I wanted to do. And it's quiet. I just put my headphones on. My kids are asleep. The world is quiet. There's no emails or Slacks pinging around. It's quite a lovely. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it because I would go back to bed at 7, then we'll wake up at 11, which is pretty bad.
But quiet time. I mean, quiet time is an important, super important.
Yeah, it has to be quiet. You know, it's got to be where you can shut a door or, you know, just say, I'm going off for 3 hours, and that's what I'm going to do.
Well, we're at a minute left, and I wanted to maybe offer Connor some final thoughts here.
Sure.
But those are really fun topics we've covered, so thank you so much for participating. And
yeah. So okay, with and also Leif, if you need to jet, you can make me host, and we'll see what happens. You know, I'm pretty sure it will continue recording to your account, and I'll just keep going a little bit after, because I know that I think you've got a pressing meeting, and I've scheduled another half an hour just for wiggle room. But
yeah,
I think
like once I give you host, it'll stop the recording, but it doesn't mean it's
will
not valuable. We can stop the recording and then you guys can continue if you'd like.
have we tested that? Are you sure it will stop the recording?
Yeah, I tried it last time actually.
Oh, okay.
It's offered
Okay.
support. Yeah,
Right.
it's because it goes to our Pixar account. So if I make you host, it's like, oop, I don't like that anymore. I
Got
can't
it.
put Connor into the thing. So anyways.
All good. All good. Yeah. Okay. Well, to summarize here, and I think we covered a lot of good topics, but I think if I'll do my best to distill it down or boil it down to its one simmered sentence, or maybe a couple. But I think what we're talking about here at the end is mostly about fuel, right? And inspiration, right? So fuel isn't always going to be the playful fuel. Sometimes you have to wake up from 3 to 4 to have the quiet time, and that quiet space is going to be your fuel. Sometimes it's the asphalts on the street. Sometimes it is grief or difficulty or pain or loss or any of those really, really difficult things. Like, we always think of inspiration as if it's like, oh, but sometimes it's like really, really painful stuff, right? And then pouring that into our work, trying to be as concise with it as possible, as simple as possible, but not cutting out anything that's essential, not filling it with fluff or flour, but distilling it down to its core flavors and ingredients that are aligned with that original intention, that tagline, which can also be adjusted if necessary. And then knowing that given that intention, that lines up somewhere on the continuum between this is a hobby where I'm doing it to improve myself, and this is me trying to emulate a production environment to become a more professional artist, right? And where you line up on that continuum is totally fine. There's no judgment. There's no one side is better than the other. But on one side, you're lowering the stakes a lot, actually. And the last little note here is one of the ways in order for you to continue to push forward and accept inspiration from life is to lower the stakes. Make sure you finish, make sure you submit, but don't stop painting because it's not good enough. Just lower the stakes and continue to work towards something that is the best thing that you can do with the timeline you've been given. That was a run-on sentence, but that's my wrap up.
That's awesome. I'm gonna stop recording right now and I'm gonna say goodbye, and I'll make you